Hello, this podcast is created to help you understand how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions. To start with, we're going to talk about how to add and subtract fractions. First, a fraction must have a common denominator. To get a common denominator, you need to multiply both numerator and denominator by an integer. Second, once you get a common denominator, you then add or subtract the numerators. But do not add or subtract your denominator. Your common denominator is the denominator of your final answer. And then last, once you add or subtract, simplify if possible. So to start with example 1, I have the denominators of 10 and 5. A common denominator of 10 and 5 would be 10, because both 10 and 5 can divide into 10. Because my first fraction has a denominator of 10, I'm going to leave it as it is, 7/10. But for 1/5 to become a fraction with a denominator of 10, I have to multiply 5 by an integer. That would be, in this case, 2. If I multiply 5 by 2, I also have to multiply 1 by 2, which is 2. Now that I have a common denominator, I can now add my numerators. 7 plus 2 is 9, divided by my denominator stays as is, so 10. Therefore, my final answer is 9/10. Example 2, a subtraction problem. The common denominator of 5 and 3 would be 15, because both 5 and 3 can divide into 15. To get 5 to become a denominator of 15, I would have to multiply 5 by 3. Therefore, I need to multiply 7 by 3 also. 7 times 3 is 21. Minus, for 3 to become 15, I'd have to multiply it by 5. For 2, I have to also multiply this by 5, and I get 10. So my new fractions are 21 over 15 minus 10 over 15. If you went to simplify those fractions, you get back 7/5 and 2/3. Now that I have a common denominator of 15, I can subtract my numerators. 21 minus 10 is 11, and 15 stays as is, so 11/15 is my simplified answer. Now let's talk about how to multiply fractions. To multiply fractions, you do not need a common denominator, so that's one less step for the problem. What you do is you first multiply the numerators, then multiply the denominators, and then simplify again if possible. In this example, we're going to take 4/5 times 3/2. I do not need a common denominator, so 5 and 2 can stay as they are. I multiply the numerators. 4 times 3 is 12. Then I multiply the denominators. 5 times 2 is 10. I can simplify this. I can divide both 12 and 10 by 2. 12 divided by 2, I will get 6. And 10 divided by 2, I get 5. Now, depending on who your teacher is, if you're just first learning how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions, they might say you can leave it as an improper fraction, 6/5. If not, to change this into a mixed number, 5 goes into 6 one time, with 1 left over, so 1 and 1/5 would be your final answer. Before we can talk about dividing, though, we must first talk about a definition called reciprocal. A reciprocal of a number, a over b, is b over a. What you're doing is you're taking the fraction and you're flipping the fraction. The reciprocal of an integer, such as a, would be 1 over a. Let's look at the first example. The reciprocal of 2/3 is 3/2. What I do is I take my numerator and denominator and I switch their places. Example 2, the reciprocal of 4 would be to put 4 over 1 and flip it, you get 1/4. Something special to know about reciprocals is that the product of a number and its reciprocal equals 1. For example, 2/3 times 3/2, you take 2 times 3, you get 6. 3 times 2, you get 6, and 6 over 6 is 1. You need to understand what a reciprocal is to be able to divide fractions. Now that we know that, Let's figure out how to divide a fraction. First, you rewrite the fraction just as you see it. Then multiply the first fraction by the reciprocal of the second fraction. The example that we will do today is 2/3 divided by 1/4. My first step then is I'm going to rewrite my first fraction. So I'm going to rewrite 2/3. Then my second step is to multiply the first fraction. So I'm going to multiply 2/3 by the reciprocal of the second fraction, which in this case would be 4/1. To multiply fractions, we just learned that you multiply straight across. 2 times 4 is 8, and 3 times 1 is 3. Again, depending on who your teacher is, they might say you can leave it as an improper fraction for the time being. If not, 8 divided by 3 as a mixed number would be 2, and then 2 left over, so 2 and 2/3. This is how you add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions.